the Wondubar crafts. So we're going to continue on with this video. I know the last one wasn't as long, but I didn't know how long it would make the video if I included some of the quilting. I'm not going to video the full thing. I'm just going to do some highlights, kind of plug them in there, and then do the binding. Because it's starting to kind of get really hot this afternoon. We're under heat advisory, so it's hot. And I put my hat on because I'm sweating. So anyways, I got the quilt backing and I've got it all attached on the frame. So I'm just gonna do an edge to edge design on it, and then I'll kind of give you guys a few little sneaky peekies here and there on how that's coming along, and then we'll move on with doing the binding and finishing up this baby quilt. All right, here we go. Proceedure and gonna roll it up for the next row. Give it a quick steam down. Make sure everything lays flat. That's it. Pushing out of the way. Looking for any loose threads along the way. Alright. There's one that's on here. It's straight because I am floating. I didn't tie this one down. It's a short enough quilt to float. The other side. Threads, tap it down on the side. And I'm using a King Tut variegated, it's an Egyptian cotton thread. It's called Valley of the Kings. And it's like a lightly mauve and pink variegated thread in both my bobbin and my upper. Very, very complimentary to this quilt. Very pretty. I love variegated threads. I know some people do not. I don't like the heavily variegated where it gives a drastic and dramatic segment between the colors. I like the King Tut's variegation. It's very subtle. My loose ends here. All right, you guys, we are finished with the quilting. I got my little stand in the hand here. As you can see, it is a really pretty quilted pattern. And get it across here. I really love that thread. I love that variegated King Tut thread. Like I said, this one is like 908, I think. Valley of the Kings is what it's called. And it's so very, very, very pretty. Actually, let me show you guys. It is this color here. Let me pull it forward a little bit. It's almost a peachy pink color, and it is variegated, but it's ever so slight, and I really, really like it. You can see kind of hopefully on the backing how nice that looks on there. I'm hoping you guys can see that on there. You have to come in a little bit, but really, really pretty. So now what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to take it off the quilt frame, and then I'm going to check the backing just to give it a once over, make sure we didn't have any. I had like 2 thread breaks. I just want to make sure I didn't have any looping prior to that I need to fix. And then I will cut my strips for the binding, and we will get this thing bound. All right, I am finished. It is the next day. It got really, really hot in here, so I just decided to take it off the quilt frame and let it sit overnight while I put the fan in the doorway to kind of cool the room down overnight. So next day, I've already checked the back to make sure I didn't have any looping. If I had, I would have turned on the camera and show you guys how I fixed that. There is a difference between having looping, a little bit of looping, 1 or 2 stitches, and sometimes that can happen where a thread broke or if your tension is not set correctly, and backlashing. That is why when I roll my quilt onto the upper, the take-up lever, or the take-up bar, I inspect as I roll up to make sure I don't have any of that, because it's much easier to rip it out when it's on the frame and fix that area than it is for me to try and do it taking it off, because if it backlashes and you don't catch it, you have to reload it back onto the frame and then try to get everything lined up, and that can be bit tedious to do. So it's much easier to do it as I go, but we didn't have any of those issues. So now I am ready to cut down and square up my quilt. So what I do is, since it's come off, I always sew off the edge. I'm gonna cut just this portion first to get the weight off of it, the excess fabric. I'm just gonna do this with all 4 corners. I'm gonna show you how I do it on this one. And normally I would go around and do all 4 corners first and then go back around, but I'm just gonna do one edge here to show you what I do to square up my quilts. And squaring a quilt, well, I know there are different people who have different definitions of squaring a quilt or how they do it. I think that squaring a quilt does not mean you take it onto a mat and square it square. What squaring is you take it to the edge of where your binding is or your border is, and you square your ruler up to that edge and you cut it. Because if you tried to square it, you could end up cutting, and then your edges, or you might have a perfectly square quilt. However, aesthetically looking at it, it's going to be, you know, it's going to look funny because you're going to have like a smaller piece here, a wider piece there. You don't do that. This is what I do. This is what I was taught to do. I like this. And I have seen people square their quilts the other way, and it doesn't come out very nice. So I just go back now. I'm taking off that little piece that I sewed on or sewed over. I'm just taking my ruler and getting it up against the edge here the best that I can. Take it slow, you don't have to do the full thing. I have a little bit that's come up here, but not a problem because that will get covered with the binding. And this fabric is very light, and I don't have all my lights on because it is hot with all that's going in my bin. So now I have a piece that looks like it might have been a little bit shorter, but when I redo, get up close and personal, I see that it is not. So I'm gonna just take that little smidgen off. That's all it was just an excess piece of binding on there. So now I should have a nice straight edge all the way around my quilt. Everything is within that, my tack down is within that 1/4 inch. It's about 1/8, maybe a little bit more in some areas. But once I put my binding on, all of that will be covered. And then I just turn my quilt and do the other 3 sides. So, and once this is done, we'll come back and we'll do the binding. All right, everyone, I have got everything squared off. I am ready to cut my binding, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how to figure out how many strips and how much yardage you need for your binding. Now, I use a 2 1/4, so that's the example I'm going to use. I had some leftover fabric from the end of this, from the end of the quilt, and it is not salvage to salvage, but the length I'm going to go ahead and use for the binding, okay? And it's 54 inches in length. So how would I calculate that? Well, I have a quilter's calculator, fabric calculator, which is really nice because I can plop in the dimension of my the width of my fabric easily by, okay, it's 54 inches, so I just put in 54, convert, minus, it's now telling the calculator that the dimensions I need uses 54 inches. I clear it. I have set my my binding width, which is 2, but I'll go ahead and do it again, 2 1/4. Okay, hope you guys can see that. Okay, 2 1/4, and then I just hit my convert and my number 8, and it's now telling me that my binding is now at 2 1/4. So I just plug in my dimensions. So I know that my quilt, I've measured it twice. It is 42 1/4 in width, and it's 60 1/2 in length. Okay, and then I just hit my quilt yardage. It's going to tell me my top, my backing. Now my binding, I need a 1/4 inch, and it says I need 4 strips, okay? However, I have found that sometimes it'll tell you 4, and it's assuming you are putting your binding together edge to edge. I am not doing that. I'm going to do a diagonal attachment for my binding, so I need to figure it out differently. And if you're like me, I like to use the diagonal, you know, piecing to piece my binding together. I think it makes it look really nice aesthetically. So this is how I calculate what I need. So I take all 4 measurements, right? All 4, measure twice, write it down, make sure you get the right dimensions, add all those numbers up, and I add 18 inches. And the reason why I do that is I don't want to just end with 2 pieces like this. I need to be able to do that last diagonal piece, and I need room so that I can manipulate the quilt and be able to successfully lay it flat and put my binding together. So I give myself about 18 inches. Yes, that's going to give me a little bit on the end, but I'd much rather have a little bit than a full strip, right? So this is what I came out with, is 223.5 inches. My fabric is 54 inches in length, but when I do a 2 1/4 strip on to attach both, I'm going to take off 2 1/4 on each end from here to here when I put them like this. Okay, from here to here will be 2 1/4, and I need it on each end with the exception of the first and the last piece. So I just include it in there, and so it's 54. I'm going to take that for each end. It's 2 1/4 and 2 1/4. That makes 4 1/2. So my fabric strip is now 4 1/2, or 49 1/2. Now I could plug that into my quilter's calculator at that point, and I should come up with 5. Okay, but we did it at 54. But I wanted to show you the math in case you don't have a quilter's fabric calculator. So now I know that my strip is going to be, I'm going to tell it I need minimally 49 1/2 inches, correct? So I'm going to take the amount of inches around my quilt and divide it by 49 1/2. Okay, and it comes out to 4 1/2 strips. So I'm just going to round it up to 5. So how much quilt yardage am I going to need? Well, right, that if you take your 2 1/4 times 5, it comes out to 11 1/4 inches is what you're going to need. So we know that if you're going to use normal fabric, okay, 30 a yard of fabric is 12 inches. Okay, and this is calculating it, you know, with yardage if you had salvage to salvage. Okay, so if you're, and I'm telling you this because chances are that's probably what you're going to want to purchase, is to ensure that you have enough to do your binding. Or if you're going to bind it in a different fabric and you're going to use standard 44 to 45 inch width. So if we divide it by 12, because that's the closest round number, we have 3. 12 goes into 36 3 times. So I need 1/3 of a yard. Okay. Now I want to show you. If you do want to do this with a quilting calculator, and I know that I need to take my fabric is 54 inches, but I need to take that off, those end pieces off the width, but I need to know how much extra I need, right, to do this quilt at 223 1/2. Okay, we already know, we did the math, 5. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tell it that my quilt yardage is 49 1/2 inches in width. So convert minus. My fabric is now there. I'm going to go in and do the same thing. I'm going to tell it that my width is 42 1/4. My length is 60 1/2. And then I'm just going to ask it my quilt yardage. My binding, I need 1/3. Remember, that's what we calculated. And I need 5 strips. So now I know I'm correct in doing 5 strips for that. Now, that says 4.5 before, okay? So half of your, if you had a strip that was 49.5 and you divided it in 2, you should have plenty, 24 inches approximately, you know, left of this. That's half of a strip. So we needed 4.5 and we rounded up to 5. I will have plenty because I need 18 to play with, right? I know I'm going to have enough with 5 strips. So I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, just ask them in the comments and I'm happy to try and clarify a little bit better for you. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to cut my strips. All right, I have all 5 of my strips cut, and what I'm going to do is piece all my binding strips together. So I'm going to take this strip and I'm going to lay it just right across like that, and then I'm going to take my second strip, and since this is not directional fabric, it's not an issue to which side is up or down. And then I'm just going to place it so that it squarely sits over the top, just like this, so it looks like an L or a backwards upside down angle, right? And then I'm just going to your piece here, give myself some room. Make sure that it lays straight here. All right, and then I'm going to, from the inner corner here, I'm going to just sew a diagonal. I'm using a 1.8 millimeter stitch. I'm not back stitching or doing anything like that. Then I'm going to take and just cut as I go, 1/4 inch above the seam. All right, and then I'm just going to repeat this with all 5 of my pieces. So I'll do it once again for you. Very, very simple, easy way to put that diagonal seam in there. I like the way it sits. I don't know, I think aesthetically it looks nicer than piecing, but you know, I could understand doing that, like especially if you have like certain directional kind of fabric and you want it to, you could match it up better doing a seamed, just a straight seamed binding. Maybe something, you know, that would be the only reason why I think I would do it, you know, but I do like the look of the diagonal piece, diagonal piecing. Just cut it about 1/4 inch, doesn't have to be perfectly, just don't want it too close. And then I'm just going to piece all these pieces together and take it over to the ironing board. At the ironing board, and I'm just going to give it a press out. Sorry, I don't mean to jiggle too much. And I'm pulling from the opposite direction that I'm going to pull this way. I'm going to go the opposite direction when I fold my binding in half, and this just kind of makes it a little more efficient. I am opening my seam. Okay. Get out any folds or anything on it. Any creases. Pretty simple. And I will do this all the way down. This whole big piece. I've already ironed everything, and normally what I do is I will just fold it in half, right? The length of your ironing board, and of course this is a little shorter because I want to get it in camera, because I have the camera sitting on the ironing board here. And then I will iron just this tip, put a pin at the end of my ironing board just like that to hold it in place. and then just fold it and make sure my edges are even all the way down. And then when I get that segment done, pull out my pin, and then I can just roll it up and pin. I'm pinning back behind the camera because that's the length of my ironing board, but I'm going to do the same thing here. This pin is not sharp. The one pin that, you know, doesn't stick me isn't sharp. Is that one sharp? I don't think these pins are sharp. These are like one of those things I got like free with. I bought these pins and then I got the other ones free. Okay, that one's sharp. So, you know, of course they're free. They're probably not any good. So anyway, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of finger press it down, kind of in place. Start at one end and just kind of pull it, push it, you know, where you need to get it so that the seams butt up. And I'm going to do this, complete that process all the way down to the end of my binding, so it's all in half. Okay, so my binding is finished. Got it set up over here, ready to go. I'm going to put it on from the back and then attach it to the front. So I want to start it, I don't know, somewhere down just past the middle a little bit, closer to the end is where I'm going to start my binding. And I'm going to make sure that my raw edges are to the raw edge of the quilt. Right, and then I'm going to pin where I'm going to start. Okay, and then I have a little tag here. It's got Quilted by Denise Bazan on it. It's on both sides. I like these tags instead of big old quilting tags. Not that there's anything wrong with those. I just like something simple and easy. So I'm going to measure about 9 inches down, because this is where that 18 inches is going to come into play. I'm going to place a second needle. This is where I'm going to start sewing. Okay. Then I need my binding clips. So grab a great big handful of them. And then I'm going to come down. I think I want to put this tag in here somewhere before the corner, obviously. So I'm just going to set it. It's designed so that there's a 1/4 inch there from the edge. Place that down. Place my binding over the top. There is someone on Etsy that makes those tags. So I got like 3 different kinds. Took a couple weeks, but they print them in washable ink, permanent ink, so they don't wash up. I've tried to make my own and they seem to wash out. Once you put them in the dryer, they just don't last. All right, so about 3 inches from, I would normally clip here, which I can do. And then about 3 inches before my corner, approximately, I'm just going to put a pin. And you guys know how much I hate pins, but I find the pins are much better to use. So now what I'm going to do is come down. I'm going to turn it 45 degrees. I'm going to kind of give it a finger press and then straight down, so that the outer portion makes this corner. I want to make sure that my fold down comes all the way to the edge of my quilt, and right there where I did that finger press, diagonally, I'm going to place a pin to keep it in place. And then about 3 inches past there, I'll place another pin. Okay, now I'm ready to turn. And typically what I do is I take about halfway down the ironing board, and that's where I set my clips. Just try to make it as easy as possible. I'm going to take it down to this next corner and show you guys that corner again, and then I'm going to finish this to take it to the machine and sew it on. Okay, so I'm very close to the edge right there. I don't want to put another clip there. Go ahead and pin it about, like I said, about 3, maybe 4, whatever, inches above. That just kind of holds it stable. You can use a clip if you want. Turn your binding from that corner edge, that point, turn it up 45 degrees upward from the quilt. Then you're going to pull it straight down. Ooh, got a piece of string on there. And then just pull it so that it's even it out on the top. Make sure you got that nice finger press in there. Pin it in place. This is going to kind of help to hold that shape in there, so when you go to quilt it, or when you go to sew it down, it'll make it nice and easy. It's kind of marked for you with the crease. And I do know some people that just they just lay the binding on there and they go. I don't like to do that. I like my binding to set nicely. This way I know exactly how much binding I have, how much extra I'm gonna have. And if there's an issue, it's not sewn on already, and trying to figure out how I'm going to correct that kind of an issue. It's pinned, it's easy to take off if I need to. So, and then I'm just going to complete this process all the way down to the end of the quilt, and I'll show you what to do when we get down to the end. Okay, so I have come back down to where the beginning of my quilt is, the binding anyway, the beginning of the binding. So I am going to measure up 9 inches from the beginning of the binding here, which is about there, and I'm going to put a pin. This is going to tell me where to stop sewing. This way, I've got now, between the beginning and end, I should have 18 inches so that I have enough play to be able to secure that binding. Now, I noticed I have a whole full strip again, extra. So we really, because it's going to come down here, and here's where it ends. You would only have about this much to actually try and get your binding secured to make that invisible, or that seamless, I should say, seamless binding in there. And that, I'm sorry, is just not something I can do. So maybe someone with very not fickle fingers, but flexible fingers can do that. I cannot. So I'm just going to fold up the excess here just in case it needs it for whatever reason. I shouldn't, but it's quite a bit actually. I could probably go ahead and cut that. Yeah, I think I'm going to cut it. So if you're going to cut it, I would make sure that you cut it past where you're going to sew it, where your beginning sew line is, just to make sure. You should, but you know, I like being safe. So there was the end right there of my 4th. This was the start of my 5th. So I had quite a bit left in there, and I'm going to stick this in my, I have a little basket over here that I use for my excess binding, because sometimes I'll sew it together and just use it for scrap quilts or what have you, you know. They're fun to do. Sometimes you get some pretty neat combinations there. And then I am just going to clip it. All right, so now we are ready to take it back over to the sewing machine. I'm gonna go ahead and put my walking foot on and get ready to sew this binding down. All right, so I've got my walking foot on. I am ready to start attaching this binding to the back. We're going from the back to the front. Remember, my first pin is not where I start. My second pin is, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Does not have to be scant. Take my pin out, drop my foot. Okay. And I am going to do a 2.5. Actually, I think I'm going to do a 2 to attach. All right, and then I'm going to just begin. I'm going to give it a little back stitch, a couple stitches, and away it goes. There's no rush. Just make sure you manage your fabric really well. And coming up on my little sewing tag here. Get it up. And I'm going to do a little back stitch on it to keep it in place. Move this down a little bit. Do not want to hit that pin. And do another little back stitch there. I'm coming down, that's going to indicate I'm coming to a corner. So I need to kind of take my time. That's, like I said, you could use a clip. I'm going to come down before my fold. Take my pin out of my fold. Take my pin out of this secondary that holds it. Okay, and then I'm going to pull it straight down. You should be able to see a crease line, and when you get to about a 1/4 inch, which I kind of guesstimate, I'm going to, from the edge, from where that point goes up, and I kind of just guesstimate, you can mark it. Now I'm going to lift my foot. I'm going to turn it so that it's at a 45-degree angle and my point is coming straight down. That's what it's lovely about these covers that are marked. I can see directly. Just going to come straight down. I don't need to back stitch. I don't need to do anything like that. So now I've got a 45-degree angle sewn here, and I've got a crease already set for me, and I'm just going to reapply it. You could put another clip there if you want to hold it in place. You certainly can while you manage your fabric to turn your quilt. All right. And then I'm just going to drop my foot, and I will do a couple stitch back stitch here. Just going to continue stitching until I get to my next corner, making sure that my binding is even with the edge of my quilt, stopping every so often to manage the fabric so I got a nice layout on it. It's not tugging, it's not pulling anywhere, so it does not distort my binding. I used to have a smaller sewing desk, and I did not have the room I do now, and this one actually folds out in the back, but I don't have the room in this room to do that, so which is kind of nice because it has a whole nother table this side So it's kind of, you could go on the back side and use it as cutting, but unfortunately in this room, and until I figure out if I want to extend this room out further or what I plan on doing, then right now it's down, so it just kind of drapes off the back. But if you have a smaller area that you have to sew on, try sticking a chair over on the side if you have a large quilt, and try draping it over. Sometimes that helps to relieve some of the tension, and you know, it takes the weight off of where you're sewing, so you don't get a lot of pulling. Or even another little side table, something like that, you know. If your desk has a drawer, pull it open and let it kind of drape over it. Okay, and I'm coming up pretty close to my second corner, and I'm going to show you this again, and then I'm going to we'll finish up, and I'll bring it back after the corner to what you need to do to attach to make a seamless binding. Okay, so almost there. And I'm going to take it down really close to the edge, pull my 2 pins, kind of pull it straight down, kind of mark it about 1/4 inch. I'm trying to stop on that crease. Turn it so that I'm about 45-degree angle, and just sew it down. Cut my thread. Okay, should automatically pop up. Make sure that that crease is in there. You can repin or clip just to kind of hold it in place. Like I said, turn it, and then start sewing a straight seam, and just give it a little couple stitch back stitch, and then onto your next corner. All right, I am almost to the end of where I need to sew for my binding real quick before we attach our ends to make it a seamless binding. So take that pin out, sew it down to there, and just give it a quick little back stitch. All right, so now we are at the end. I have my front pinned. Okay, see if we can get this so you guys can see this. So I am pinned here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a little tug. Don't stretch it, just a little tug. And I apologize if you guys can hear the thunder. Thank goodness we had a storm blow in. It's blowing in now. It was unexpected and not in the weather. Yay, it'll cool it down a little bit, I hope. All right, my binding is 2 1/4 inches. So from that edge, I'm going to measure from the very beginning of my binding right here. I'm going to measure 2 1/4, and I'm going to give it a little mark. Okay, this is going to be on the inside of the binding. I don't need to worry about it. You know what, if I need to wash it off or anything of the sort. So now get some of this managed out here. I'm going to unclip my excess. I'm going to lay my quilt as flat as I possibly can. Okay, and then I'm going to lay it down up against the seam, and I'm going to kind of give it a little tug, not too tight. And then I am going to, and it looks like it's going to cut right above that, right at the 4 strip mark. So I'm going to mark that, Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut this portion straight up, or as straight as I can. So I have a little bit of a strip. There was the end of number 4 and the beginning of 5. So really, I probably could have gotten away with 4. Well, no, not. Yeah, I probably could have, because I would have had enough room here to do what I needed to do. But that's okay. I'm always good for a little scraps here and there. Okay, I am going to unpin my beginning. This is where you've got this excess to kind of manage. I'm going to kind of tuck my quilt, kind of roll it in a little bit so it folds over. So I've got some room. I'm going to open, let's see, I'm going to open that up so that my right side is facing upward. I'm going to take the beginning of my binding, kind of scrunch this up a little bit, and I want to lay my ending straight across, take my beginning and open it so that my right side faces the right side of my other piece of binding, my end. And then we can turn it so that you have a 90-degree angle here. I've got a little bit of fraying. Let me clip that real quick. All right. And the same way that we pieced our binding together, we're going to lay it so that it lays flat, so that our corner edges are straight. And then I'm just going to place it under my foot, and you can pin this if you want. I've done enough of these that I really becomes more of a pain in the butt to pin it. And I'm going to just make sure that my fabric lays flat, so that diagonal seam. And before I cut anything, I'm going to lay this piece straight out and make sure that I have enough and that it's going to lay flat. And it is. I'm not going to have any buckling or anything like that. It's nice and taut. It's not tight, but it's not, it's taut. It's not like wicked tight. So now lay this out nice and flat. Give myself about a 1/4 inch seam allowance there, you know, from the edge of my seam. I could finger press this open like so. And I did pick up one of these June Taylor, it's a magic seam wand. It's supposed to help do your seams like that if you have flat seams that you need to do and are not near an iron, and that would be a little hard to do with this. And then I'm just going to finger press it closed, lay it flat. Should lay pretty flat on there. Find where I left off sewing, and then I am just going to give it a little back stitch and start again. And I should have about 18 inches left to sew, and the binding is attached to the back. It's very, very simple once you've done it a couple times. If you're unfamiliar with doing this method, I would suggest making some squares, maybe some like 10-inch, 8, 10, maybe 12-inch squares, and just take some practice binding, some scraps, and practice with it. It's not difficult at all. If you're going to use a smaller area, obviously you want to leave a little bit smaller room. So maybe like on a 8-inch, I would leave maybe 5 or 6 inches so you get the corners done, and then that would give you enough space to reattach it. So now I'm at the end. I'm going to give myself a little back stitch. I am done putting the binding on the back, attaching it. Okay, so we are back at the ironing board. I apologize if it seems a little dark because, like I said, the storm clouds are coming in. So everything's getting a little dark. All right, so now I'm ready to press my fabric or my binding over. But what I want to do is every corner, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and clip it diagonally, okay, so that I don't clip off my stitching, but right at the stitching right here. So I have a corner, and then I'm going to take and just a little bit, just shave a little bit off those edges right here and right here, so that way it lays nice and flat and I don't have a whole lot of bulk there. And I'm going to do that with every corner. So now I'm just going to take my iron and I'm just going to poke my tip right into there to kind of set that crease, and then I am just going to iron this all the way around. I'm going to show you here. Let me turn it so that you can see. I kind of want it a little bit closer close up. I'm going to iron it flat. Don't worry about whether or not it flattens your quilting, because you can always pop the quilt into the dryer for about 5 minutes and it will fluff it back out. Or you could just shake it if you don't want to put it in the dryer. Alright, back out to another corner. I am going to trim that little edge right there. Trim this down a little bit, just a little, just a hair. Okay, maybe like that much off the edge. It looks like a lot, but it really is not. It's only about that much. Okay, so that way it just kind of lays flat and some of the bulk is removed from the corner. Take my tip and just iron it in. And while I'm doing that, I'm also looking for any threads that are poking out the back, because you know, it is fabric, it does fray. Okay, just do that, and then you're going to do that all the way around, and I'll come back and show you how to flip it and attach it on the other side. Alright, so I've got all of it ironed out, all 4 corners kind of tucked down. And you might be asking, why do I clip the corner here? If it's already a point, wouldn't that help make your corner more pointy? No, because once you flip it over, it could poof out on that corner and then pull this fabric inward, and then you have a short corner that doesn't lay flat, and it could really screw up the... I thought the same thing when I started doing my bindings, mitered like that, and I thought, oh, how come my corners are always, when I pull them in, why are they sucked in all the way to the edge like that? It's because it was not, that quilting in that corner is pulling it, taking up so much of that corner space. So get rid of it and then form your own corner with your binding, and you'll be much happier. It'll lay nicer. So now we're ready to flip it over, and we're going to kind of do the same thing here. I'm not going to start in a corner. I'm going to start a little bit further down, and I'm just going to pull that down and over where I'm going to lay the binding. Okay, I'm going to do that all the way around to kind of set a crease, so to speak, in there. And then I'm going to set my corner pieces. Now, here is where you could save yourself some time, and I should have showed you guys this. I'm trying to rush, I think. Don't rush. Okay, we ironed this piece. So go ahead and take your clips and just start clipping. Kind of like what we did when we attached the binding. Okay, this will hold it in place. You don't have to do that. You know, if you're comfortable with holding it over, you can do that on smaller projects. I will, but for a quilt, I like it to kind of set nice and even, or set nice and flat while I'm quilting it and in place. So we're going to do the same thing, kind of what we did when we put the binding on. We're going to form our corner. So I'm going to pull the corner up. I am going to iron it straight down. Oop, but don't put too big of a crease in there. All right, I'm going to pin about 3 inches from the top to hold it. I'm going to take this corner, I'm going to flip it up. Now this time I want to kind of get a little press in there. Doesn't have to be immaculate, just enough to hold it in place. Now this is straight out. Now all I got to do is fold this back over. See how nice that lays? I don't know if you guys can see it. So my corner is shaped. I'm going to press it. Let it cool. Don't stick your finger on it because it's going to be hot. Use my pin, and I am going to pin that seam right into place. And so now you have a nice mitered corner right there. Let me see if I can get that just a little bit straighter. Down there. Nice and sharp corner in the edge. You see here, the bulk is here where we cut it, and then my corner has no bulk in it, so it's going to lay nice and flat. Do the same thing, 3 inches from, pin it, turn the quilt. And I'm just going to pull this out. I've got a lot of fraying. I think this pink fabric is a frayer. It's a frayer. Okay. And while I'm pulling up and pinning, I am going to try and tuck as much of any loose threads that do stick out that aren't wild. I'm going to tuck them up under in there. Okay. All the way down. This is a short end here, I think. Yeah. It's not hard at all. You don't have to iron it if you don't want to. If you're not comfortable, just flip it over and make sure you pull it, you know, so you don't have any tucking on the back. I like to lay my iron down on it because when I get done with a quilt, I normally will pop it in the dryer anyway for about 5 minutes. I have some wool balls that I use in there, which help because I don't use fabric softener. Never, not even on my clothes. Well, I take that back. I will use it on brand new jeans that are stiff, only to soften them, but only one time, because fabric softener eats your clothes. Yes, it does. And what do you think it will do with a quilt? Yep. So, you know, 5-10 years when your quilt starts getting holes in it, you'll wonder why. That's why. Don't use fabric softener. Use some scent crystals, that's fine. Those are nice. I put those in with my wash and then put it with some wool balls in the dryer, and then my clothes come out very nice and soft. Alright, set that press. Okay, about 3 inches up. We're going to lay a pin. Help hold that corner down. Alright, bottom corner up. We're doing it like the opposite we did the other, because remember, before we came down, then we folded up and over. Now we're going to do it from the opposite end, and your corners will lay nice and flat that way. Okay, I like that corner. Just going to press it in place. Don't touch it, it'll get burnt. Give it a second to cool, and pin my corner there. So your corners should now look like that on one side, nice and mitered on one, nice and mitered on the other. And that's how I get mine to lay so nice and flat and nice and squared. You know, my mitered corner comes in to a nice squared edge. You know, you take your time, use the iron, clip that excess off that corner, and then just trim it around the side so that you can form your own corner. You'll be happier with your mitered corners. So we are ready to attach our binding to the front. Complete this quilt. Yay. All right, so you can start anywhere you like. I typically like mine closer to the bottom front on the, well, what would be the right side. You can start anywhere. And I am going to sew mine, instead of doing a 1/4 inch from here and having all this excess be able to flip up, I am going to sew it. Oop, let me get this laid out here. So that this edge, which will sew a 1/8 of an inch, and my clips got stuck back there, that's why. Oh, okay. All right. So that I'm 1/8 of an inch from this edge, which will tack it down really nice and look really pretty. All right, so start off. I'm gonna give it a 1, 2 stitch, back stitch, and go. And I'll show you what you do when you get to the corner. Okay, so it's already laying nice and flat. Because I ironed it. I'm just going to stop every so often and manage my fabric. And I'm going to keep to this edge. Okay. About a 1/4, like I said, 1/8 of an inch. All right, I can pull that pin. All right, coming to my corner now. I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna wait to get my fold underneath my foot so I can pull my pin. Okay, I am just gonna sew up to about 1/8 over here, and I'm just gonna give it a 1, 2. All right, I'm gonna turn it with my needle down and make sure that when I put my foot down, I am at that angle right there, right where I need to be to sew that 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm gonna take it down. I'm gonna give it a 1 stitch, back stitch, and then just keep sewing. Turn my fabric and get everything managed here so everything lays nice. And I'll do another corner for you guys so you can see. Take my pin out. Keep my seam allowance, or my seam, right at a 1/4 inch from the edge of that binding. I do prefer to put my binding on the front. Some people like to attach it to the front and sew it to the back, and that's perfectly fine. It's just personal preference. I like how it looks on the front with that nice straight stitch that goes down in the front. And then when you wash the quilt, sometimes that little edge might give a little puffy ruffle. You know, it kind of, you know, when you wash something with that little edge, and I think that makes the quilt look pretty. It gives it a little bit of dimension and character, and that's just personal preference. I have had clients ask me to do the opposite and sew it to the front and attach it to the back, and that's perfectly fine. Make sure all my little pieces get tucked in there. Alright, coming up to a corner again. Take my pin out, and I'm just going to move slowly up to that edge so that my fold is underneath my foot, so my foot holds it down in place. I am just going to take my time. Alright, let's check that. Nope, I think I need one more stitch. And that's why it's really good to keep your needle down in there so you can turn it and give yourself a nice gauge. Do a back stitch. I just do a 1 stitch back stitch there. Alright, that's the end of my corner. Now I can manage my fabric again. So I'm going to complete this. I'm going to come all the way around. If you guys can see, I did tack up my little tag here. Okay, it's pinned up. So I will make sure that when that gets underneath the foot, it stays in that position so it doesn't get sewn down. And when it's all complete, I'll come back and give you a look-see-loo. Okay guys, I am almost finished. I'm about 1 inch to 2 inches from the end. I'm going to come to that where my seams meet. Just give it a couple stitch back stitch, maybe 1 forward, and we're finished with that. So now what I can do is just take that, snip off that little bit of tail end on my binding where I started and stopped quilting. Okay, so here are my corners. Let's see if we can get some light on them. Okay, really nice and sharp. If you wanted, you could sew those down. I don't. You could probably hand stitch them down. I don't. I think they look great. Nice and sharp on one end. Nice and sharp on the other. Okay, and then let's see if I can find. Here's another corner. Same thing. Nice and sharp on both ends, see? And because we took that bulk out of there, I could form my own corner and have it lay nice and flat and even. It took me a long time to figure that out. Okay, and then here's where my tag is. I had it sewn upward, so it's sewed right underneath. And so now when it washes, it can go either direction. Very nice binding. And now I'm going to show you guys what it looks like completely finished. Alright guys, this is the baby quilt finished. Alright, binding is attached. I just clipped it up onto, pinned it up there and in the center just so you guys can see it. Looks pretty good to me. Here's our corners. Has a nice little edge on the front of the binding, so when it washes it will kind of give a little wave, and I think that looks really aesthetically pretty. And then you can see the quilting hopefully on that, and that is the quilt finished. Yay! I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And let me flip the camera around. Okay guys, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and watching me piece a baby quilt and put it all together from start to finish. I know that a few of you have mentioned the snippet rolls, so I plan on that being my next video. Because I have a client's quilt I need to get done first, and I have a sew out, an embroidery sew out that from a couple design, there's 4 flower designs my daughter created, and I need to get those sorry, sewn out so that I can get those patterns uploaded on my Etsy. And I might take you along just to kind of show you those, give you a preview of those if you're interested. Pardon me. And then I will do a snippet roll and show you guys how I made those beautiful little snippet rolls and how you can make your own. They're not hard at all. So until next time, guys, plenty of hugs, loves, and blessings. Mwah. Bye, guys.